Hello everyone, my name is May. I'm a Deathslinger main in Dead by Daylight, and today I wanted to go over in an unscripted manner talking about the palette density update that Dead by Daylight introduced with the 9.2.0 patch. Of course, they put out this tweet asking us what we think about the palette density update overall, and my general synopsis and my general reaction is that the palette density update has made games extremely frustrating on pretty much any map that you can go to. This is because when you play any killer that is lower tier, or you play a killer without bringing optimal perks and playing in an extremely oppressive kind of way, killers tend to fall by the wayside if they don't have a way with hitting over or dealing with pallets specifically. If their power is countered by the fact that there is a pallet or it can be blocked off and you force them to kick the pallet more frequently, characters like the pig come to mind, then you run into these scenarios where your killers that are already low tier are already not going to be performing well. Now, I know that Dead by Daylight typically doesn't look at tier lists too seriously. They tend to work off of internal stats more regularly, which is why killers like the Artist were nerfed, or at least attempted to have a nerf in her add-ons a little while ago because of her relatively high kill rate. However, I think that kill rate was also relative to her relatively low play rate, meaning that she has a very dedicated player base that gets better at the killer as time goes on. So perhaps a bit of a misunderstanding of exactly what the statistics are showing, but I do think that Behavior does understand that there are high tier killers, because in the 9.2.0 PTB, we had this specific list of killers that got a reduced effect from the unique hook bonus. Now, if you weren't around for this, when a survivor gets hooked by one of these killers or by any killer, you gain a bonus kicking action damage. You get bonus damage on your next kicking action, but it was reduced for these killers specifically. And when people see the Blight, the Dark Lord, Ghoul, Hillbilly, Krazu, and Nurse, everyone pretty much universally agrees that these are your S tier killers. These are your highest tier killers. And I think that is a recognition from Behavior that, yes, there are killers that when they are mastered and when they are played well, they get extremely consistent results at high levels. Now, entry level, I mean, I had a game recently where I got 0 hooks on Nurse, so it's not totally, I'm probably helping, you know, that narrative in terms of statistics overall. But I do think that the recognition of this here does show a baseline understanding that there are killers that have much higher power budgets than somebody like Trapper or Skull Merchant or Pick. Because of that disparity in the overall killer roster and the relative killer powers, what ends up happening is that when you have this palette density quality of life update with the Macmillan Estate, you know, all of these realms that we have in here, you end up alienating a lot of the killers that have relatively weaker powers, ones that might not perform quite as well because of how non-oppressive their powers actually are. But realistically, what I think that this palette density update does is that it makes games less varied. That's the first thing that I don't like about it. Dead by Daylight is a game that thrives on being fresh and new and having a whole bunch of different variables that go into it, and part of that was also the palette density. When you load into Wretched Shop specifically, you have a chance to have that window spawn on main where you have to break open the wall as a killer, but you also have a chance for it to not spawn there and it spawns on the other side, and you have basement spawn in that location, and so the dynamic changes around the way that the main building is laid out. The same exact thing happens with pallet density. One time you might have a pallet on one side of the building, then that pallet gets moved to the other side of the building, and so you have to play every game differently based on what information you're able to gather on both killer and survivor side, based off of, oh, the pallet didn't spawn on this side, so I need to play to my strengths or to my weaknesses on this side. Or killers go ahead and create their own dead zones, and no, I've been in this location a lot, I've broken a lot of pallets on this side of the map, therefore if a survivor goes into this location, I have created a dead zone. There's no real natural dead zone that goes into it. By putting a bunch of new pallets down, what ends up happening is that every single game you always have the highest possible quota of every pallet to destroy on every map. So when you go to, again, I'm going to use Wretched Shop as an example, there's a chance for the pallet to spawn on one side of the main building and not the other, but now with the pallet density update, the pallets almost always spawn on both sides. I think I've seen like one game where it only spawned on one side, but now it actually spawns on both sides of the main building, on top of that loop already being strong enough because of how you can chain into that main window that is difficult for killers to loop into because they have to break the wall. But what I'm describing here in terms of gameplay between these two is a series of checks and balances. Survivors have to check what resources they have around for themselves, and killers have to efficiently chew through what the survivors have, depending on how much time that the survivor is allowed to waste away from them. When you get this quality of life update that increases pallet density and effectively neuters a lot of the lower tier killers, what you will see now is far more killers that are higher up in tiers. A friend of mine recently said, who is a doctor main, that they had the most fun playing Dead by Daylight with Blight because Blight is a killer that is not affected by this pallet density quality of life update. And we can also debunk some of this dead zone claim here by going into one of these maps and showing just how insane it is to have to run between every single pallet. Haddonfield is also included on this list, which is fine. I think Haddonfield is one map that really needed it because there were a lot of dead zones and very few pallets on that map, and survivors needed that, especially in the pallets in the main street, in order to actually maintain the chase on such a relatively small map. But the rest of the maps, well, you'll see what I mean in just a second here. Okay. So the map that I have chosen here is the Groaning Storehouse, which is a gigantic Macmillan map, and one of the maps that was affected by this pallet density update. I also have Zancian Tactics. Hey, how's it going? I have Zancian Tactics on so that you can see where these things are. And Shack, as a lot of us already know, is a very strong tile that has, of course, this main window that you have to go through, and then the God pallet that always spawns here. But then when you have a pallet that spawns into the God window, and then another pallet that spawns out here after you use this one, that can then also still loop back into Shack because you're close enough to it, or it loops into another filler pallet here, or a filler pallet here with a God rock that you can't really, you can loop 4.4s on this for forever, and then back into Shack again, or you can even take this pallet here and loop into this tile here with this, what is this, a TL tile? Yeah, this TL tile here that can then loop back into this pallet here. And you can see how a lot of the way that these are set up really just makes it so tough for any killer to deal. Now, I'm playing Wraith, obviously, because Wraith is a killer that I can navigate around maps like this quite easily when I'm demoing things for custom games and what have you. But, I mean, you can see the density inside of just this screenshot here. I have maximum FOV. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all within my one FOV within the range of Zancian Tactics here, and then we know that we have one back here with a TL tile as well as Shack being right here, which then loops into this, which then loops into main, which then has another filler pallet here, and then a filler pallet on the edge map there, and then a pallet here. But even between these two pallets, kind of a dead zone right there, isn't it? And then you have the window that goes into main, and then a filler there, and a filler there, and then another tile here that's on this 4 lane, and then a filler in the corner there. But then when you clear this pallet here, and we take a step all the way back into main even, again, there's another dead zone that just exists there anyway. So the pallet density update hasn't actually reduced dead zones or really fully eliminated them, but rather what I think it's done is that it's increased the number of pallets that survivors can run to around extremely strong tiles, but then still left some of the map generation up to, I don't know why my FPS is doing this, but it's left some of these like tiles around here up to just really bad RNG. You get all the pallets on this side of the map, but then as soon as you're over on this side of the map, you just get nothing in the center here whatsoever. So if the pallet density update was here to actually specifically counter dead zones, I don't think it's doing a particularly good job of it here. I mean, even if we walk forward, now we can see those two fillers on the back of this massive hill here. But if we're here in main, oh, now we're out of range out of 32 meters of that pallet, and it just becomes a lot easier to down a survivor if they're in this corner specifically. But you know, what do pallets tend to counter the most? They tend to counter the lower tier killers because the lower tier killers are the ones that have the hardest time dealing with these pallet setups. And the reason why those killers are lower tier is because they don't have a way of going around the back side of them. Our S tier killers that we have, the ones that did get the reduced pallet or generator kicking effect in the PTB when those anti-tunneling changes were implemented, the ones that were impacted the most, or that were recognized as a lot stronger, were ones that have ways of dealing with or going around or completely ignoring pallets. And so in order for players now to feel like they can actually play the game, they will likely be playing a game in such a way that they just play a higher tier killer. Why would you play the likes of Wraith or Trapper or Skull Merchant or really any killer that just has to rely on basic attacks anymore when you can play Hillbilly, who can sprint around the map? And even then with Hillbilly, there's these issues with these new filler palette tiles where if Hillbilly tries to go for a curve, suddenly there's a lot more in his way, and so it's actively detrimental to him. Maybe it's good for countering the nurse. Maybe that's like one specific effect that the game has so far, but I do think that this is getting a little bit silly, especially when it goes around to spawning around Shack. And there's no variety in it now. There's no, oh, there's nothing on this side of the map, so I can, you know, find the survivor on the weak side. It's just run to a pallet forever, and that's kind of boring and kind of disheartening for playing any killer that you might not be the most effective with. Anyway, the survivors in the bots gen rushed me, so I'm going to have to go ahead and probably go back to our Chrome tab to talk about the last little details of this update so far, and to really just hammer home the point of how pallet density update just doesn't seem very friendly to killers at all, and seems to be rather mind-numbing and hand-holdy for survivors as well. Ultimately, my opinion about Dead by Daylight is that it is a game that encourages great variety. The pallet density update discourages variety by giving a guaranteed pallet that the killers always have to chew through and the survivors always have, and that level of safety that the pallet provides. It increases the strength of windows, which windows are already extremely strong, and therefore alienates a lot of the killers, like the ones that I've mentioned many times throughout this video, who might struggle to actually deal with those survivors. Players who play lower tier killers as one of their beloved mains were able to put up with the game so far because there wasn't a whole lot that was against them. But now with the pallet density update, it feels like there's a lot more against them, and it feels a lot more frustrating to actually play the killer side of the game. On the survivor side, you also have the ability to basically just run wherever you want without windows of opportunity, and understand that there are just pallets basically anywhere on the map unless the killer has been able to deal with them quickly, of which there are very few that can do that, and those that are the very few, aside from Nemesis, are considered your top tier killers. So this pallet density update discourages people from playing lower tier killers, discourages survivors from learning how to play the game to a higher level of potency, and it also encourages players to play more high tier killers, which in turn infuriates the survivors because I'm sure that they're sick and tired of seeing Kaneki and Krazu and all these other new killers that have extremely powerful powers in every single game that they play. But until the pallet density update gets changed or reverted or addressed in some way, I think we're going to continue seeing a lowered variety of killers in every match, to the point where Dead by Daylight might just become a simulator for S-tier killers. So that's my thoughts on the pallet density update. I know it's kind of unscripted and a little bit all over the place. If I had more time to maybe write down my thoughts and all that, I would share them here, but for now I think that I've got my point across, and I hope that you all are having a good rest of your day. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully Behavior takes some note of this. Hopefully this was clear for them as well. I don't like this update. I hope that it changes, and I hope that we rebalance maps in the future to not just be balanced around a single variable, but instead around the actual skill of the individual player. Thanks for listening, and have a good one.